We're on episode 3.
Episode 3, juniors.
I'm going to laugh here. Welcome to the Simplifies summer series. We're doing Homeschool to College. This is episode 3. It's our most important episode, I would say, in a way. It kind of is.
They're all important, Jill.
Okay. Oh no.
Oh no. It's because it's about junior year.
Junior year is very important. All the episodes are important. You should watch them all, and especially our bonus episode that we did with 2 other IECs. That's really good. Has a lot of good information. But this one, if you have a junior, don't miss it. It's very important in that way. Yes. If you have an upcoming junior, and it may be one of our longer videos because there's a lot of information we want to cover.
It might be part 3 and part 4. We're going to see how it goes.
There may be 6 parts. We may just talk about juniors for all day.
I don't. Aren't you going out later?
I got to go to the movies in an hour. Okay, so it won't be longer than that. All right, junior year. What do you want to start with, Farrah?
So I think just that whole idea that it is the most important year. Like it's the one that colleges are focused on. Your kid it's the one that's the most recent from their perspective that's also complete. So they can see the grades, they can see the coursework, they can see the activities, all of it. And as a result, it's the one that they focus on the most, especially like more selective schools. They're really looking at that. They're looking at the progression, which we've talked about a little bit in previous episodes, that it gets more intense. And that means that this is, for most students, the most intense academic activities, everything year.
Most important, intense year. Yeah, intense.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes we'll tell our juniors after this, it'll be a little easier. So it's like the top of the mountain and then you get to come down a little bit.
It's like a little plateau.
Yeah.
And you have to apply to college, but definitely by like spring of senior year, everybody's checked out. We'll talk about that in the next episode.
And they're allowed to check out a little bit.
A little bit. I think so. I think you plan for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say for anyone who may be watching this and is like, their kids done with junior year and they're starting senior year, don't panic or anything. Like, it's okay if it wasn't the most academic year or anything. But for those not yet to junior year, it's good to know all this information.
Yeah. I mean, there are ways to mitigate it if you know, and some kids can't do an intense year, because they have, physical or mental health issues.
Right.
I mean, it's, then they just can't. You can't do, I feel like we've tried to say this, we're talking about ideals of things, and what colleges are looking for. But we're particularly talking about like more selective schools, what they're looking for. And you can't do what you can't do, Yeah. So you shouldn't over focus on that,
I would say, specifically with the parents, your teen can't do what they can't do. I mean, they just can't, right? So don't worry about it. Don't stress about it too much. But for those who can do it, junior year should be the plateau. Mm-hmm. Okay, so academics. What to do with academics? How to plan for that? We've talked about this earlier. You want to just keep going higher and higher if you can, or at least at the same level in junior year. Depends what you did in 9th and 10th.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why in 9th you shouldn't start out with like 7 APs.
No, that's why you do it that way. You want to build, and you want there to be at least some classes that are like 2nd level classes. So that can be APs or dual enrollment, and we can talk about that in a sec. But just in general, it can also be 2nd level high school classes. So it's like you do biology and then you do anatomy and physiology, and a prerequisite is that you have done a high school biology course already, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that you're building on things,
sorry.
Yeah,
I was
level
jumping real quick.
Something.
Level 2 in areas that your kid is very interested in. That is very helpful. So if they're going towards like STEM, science or math or something, if they're in humanities, quite the opposite.
I have to stop because I'm getting my computer back. Hold on.
Okay. Let me pause this. We're back. I don't know how I'm going to edit this, but we're back. So we were talking about area of interest. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in your area of interest, it's good to go a little second level or take interesting coursework or something to help your transcript stand out a bit when you apply to colleges.
And I would say that's true for well-rounded students too, you know?
Yeah.
Because you know, we like to encourage our clients to be a little bit pointy, just especially junior year. But not all students are. No. But I would say you still have to show that you have some area of interest that you've built on.
Yeah.
So I think that's always better. And the other reason is like, this is junior year is kind of your last shot to explore some things. So like if you have a student who's suddenly like, I think I want to go into business. I think I want to go into environmental science. I've decided I want to become a writer. Like, and they haven't done any extra coursework in those areas, or, for something like, psychology or business or something, they haven't done any coursework at all. Like get a course in.
Yeah.
Like this is your last shot to do that. It also, they're about to start choosing colleges, and, to apply to, they have to pick somewhere that has the programs they want. And so they should know at least somewhat what those might be. So
I would add too that if you're limited budget or limited options or whatever, a student can self-study those things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And create a really interesting course, and the parent can write it up as a course description, give it an interesting title. It serves just the same purpose, as taking a second level AP course online or something.
Absolutely. And, you can use, MOOCs like from Coursera and stuff. You can use, great courses. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes your library has those, like, or you can get this subscription service.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but they can also just do a book list, documentaries. I mean, there are podcasts. Absolutely.
You can do a little outschool course and build from that. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah, it can be a variety of resources. You can do a bunch of things. I think it's good to have some. They also, courses like that can bring balance, especially if a student is like, they're doing AP calculus or AP statistics or AP physics or like these really tough courses that are just intensive in terms of time. AP literature, like these are,
it's suck your time. Yeah, your time sucks.
Time sucks. Yeah, and so having something where it's like, oh, I'm studying like psychological experiments by like listening to podcasts about them. Like, it looks good. It's fine. It also gives them a little bit of wiggle room in their schedule. It's, it's a good thing to do.
That we've talked about before, and it's really important. And it's one of the reasons you homeschool, right? You homeschool for freedom. One of those freedoms in high school, because there's not as many, right, as when you're like homeschooling elementary or whatever. But one of those freedoms is the freedom of scheduling and finding balance. So kids in high schools, like a public high school or private, who are on this upper level track doing all these APs or whatever the top courses are usually so stressed and so busy and have very little time. What time they do have goes to activity, and that's it. And it's not a good way to live. It really isn't, especially during the teen years. So having this balance in the schedule where, yes, you're doing some very high level courses, it's going to look good to colleges, whatever it is, whether it's APs, second level high school course or dual enrollment. But then you have interesting coursework that's high input, very little output. It's so much better for your teen and their schedule, and it'll serve them well during college applications.
Yeah.
So I encourage that.
Like it serves them well. Like it's, in so many ways. Okay. So, AP or dual enrollment?
There's no right answer to this question.
And people are always asking, and it's always like, well,
although I will say some people have very strong opinions that they know the right answer to this question, especially in various online groups.
There are right answers for specific people, I think, in specific situations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like if you live in a state where dual enrollment is high quality and easily accessible, really inexpensive for homeschoolers, maybe even free for homeschoolers, and your student wants to go to an in-state public university, dual enrollment is like usually a better choice. because
it'll serve them well in that situation.
It will, yeah, typically it will serve them well. But there's not, even then sometimes, because, one of the things that I think can depend a lot is that some of these some community colleges aren't that high quality, honestly, and their purpose is not to shepherd intellectual thought. It's to get kids through, to get associate's degrees for trade schools and things. And if that's your community college, then you may get, even if it is free, you may get better, more in-depth coursework with AP courses. But the flip side, of course, is that some parents are convinced that like community colleges they're just a waste of time and nobody is serious there. And I mean, we've had students have really great experiences. I mean, do internships through their community college, do research with a professor through the community college. That's an amazing opportunity. And also be able to access, if you do your, chemistry, like general chemistry through your community college, then you can go do organic chemistry. You can do the next level.
Right.
Things. You don't have to worry about having passed a certain test. You don't have to worry about, and sometimes it's better for a specific student who isn't great at tests, that they can, but they are diligent with work and can show up and do those things. Sometimes it's a much better option. So it just
there's a lot of moving pieces in that. And even if you think the right answer for where you live and your situation, it's also dependent on the kid, right?
Yes.
So I had my kids in California. The twins were, same age. Neither one of them wanted to do dual enrollment, which was interesting to me because I was kind of like pro dual enrollment and they had no desire at all. My daughter ended up doing tons of AP courses and she's just good at it and taking the test, that was her wheelhouse. So it made more sense for her to do that. Her twin brother did a couple AP courses, never took exams, never did dual enrollment, just mostly did courses at home, and that served him well. It just depends what your situation is and you need to know your teens and everything. So, I mean, I do think AP courses can be very engaging. The material you're learning at a very deep level. There's some wonderful teachers online for homeschoolers that teach these courses that you get that very involved teacher who will usually write up really nice letters of rec. That's a good reason. You can get letters of rec from professors at dual enrollment too. And we've worked with students who had like a really great relationship with one professor or another in an area they're interested in. So that can happen, but sometimes it is more difficult.
It is. Yeah. My son got a dual enrollment professor wrote. He had taken a second level course.
Right.
With her. So he'd had her twice. And she wrote him a really kind one, I think. But this is the year to be sure that you're establishing relationships. So I would say if you are doing dual enrollment, there is a little bit of a barrier there that, because professors aren't typically used to writing, first year college recommendation letters. Though it depends on where you are and how many homeschoolers they have in their courses, but it's not the norm. And so they're not used to it. And sometimes they're kind of underpaid. They're not like, sometimes they're transient between different different community colleges. So you just want to be aware of that going in. That can be a reason to do a homeschool course because homeschool teachers, like in these online courses or, at your beloved local co-op that has some academic options, that they typically are used to writing those letters and they like homeschoolers. They probably like your kid, so I think they're a better bet sometimes, but it doesn't matter what the situation is. The student, this is the year they have to establish those relationships.
This is why I like that your son took 2 courses with the same teacher and was able to get a letter of rec. So that's always an option, to try to really get to know someone.
Both his letters of rec, because he also had one from a homeschool teacher, and he took her course. She had some courses that you could take repeatedly.
Again
He
and
took
again.
it
Yeah.
4 times. I mean, over several years. But it was, I took it for the first time in 8th grade, and he took it for the last time as a senior in high school. So it was, so he established a relationship and was able to ask for that letter of recommendation, which is really nice.
That's what happened with my youngest, right? Both his letters of rec were from teachers online who he had taken multiple courses with and really got to know, And if you have a kid who is shy or a little introverted or has trouble with these relationships, even I would, prod them to start reaching out, even if it's just through email or chat bots or something, to just kind of get known to the teacher as best they can.
Yeah, it's kind of important. And then, at the end of junior year, they should ask, before they lose the contact information.
Right.
Especially if it's going to be a dual enrollment teacher. It's even more important. So I think that's pretty key.
They should reach out when they're fresh in their mind, get all their information, and then say, I'll be in touch once the Common App is up and everything.
So this is also adding to the intensity of the year of testing.
The year of testing.
Oh,
it's the year of testing.
I can't not make a face. I hate
the year of testing.
The year it doesn't matter how many times you say it, it's not going to be better.
It's okay for some students, right? Some kids.
It is actually, but you know what? They only have to take it once, maybe twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a decision that a lot of parents we work with agonize over if they have a teen who's not good at testing, and it's like, well, should they push them to test? Should they find someone to work with to get the score up? Should they spend the time doing that? Or should they devote that time to other things that'll help with admissions?
I mean, honestly, I feel like everyone agonizes over it. Like, we work with students who it's like, I got a 34 on the ACT, and the parents are like, okay.
Should they take it again?
The math score was this, and this, blah, blah, blah. And does that show, should they take it again? Could they get it up a point?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and sometimes they should, like, it depends on their goals. But I think it's, I honestly at this point, like, I mean, we've worked with students who got like a 1560 and they're like, I'm going to do it again. It's like, okay.
Sometimes they get it up.
It's the case that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And we were like, to me, that's an opportunity cost. I think everything with testing, you should go in thinking about it as an opportunity cost, because it is what you're going to get from the score better, than the opportunities that you lose by not, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you have to think about it, because it takes a student time. I think it's so easy for parents to be like, well, we'll just have it. We'll take it again. We'll prep again, and it's like, but for the student, that means, okay, what is that taking away from in terms of those academics and also those activities? Because those also are needed get your student into college. And so if they end up spending every weekend doing test prep, and then they're not finishing their Eagle Scout badge, or they're not participating in the robotics team, or they're not, making their crocheted art piece that they were going to do, I mean, it doesn't matter what the thing is. If they're not doing that, then what are they losing? So which opportunity is the better one in terms of their time?
So that comes down to, like, if they put a ton of time into studying for the exam, for their tests, and they go take it, is it going to improve enough to even help?
Right. To expand their options. And how much do they want them expanded? Because sometimes students their top choice is a school that they're already well in range for, or that's test optional, and that the rest of their profile is going to get them in most likely, like it's a target school or even a likely school sometimes. And yet they're agonizing over this decision, whether or not they should take it again. And it's like, well, but you're fine. Like, you don't need to. So, because there's also the opportunity cost of, like, that balance that we talked about. Like, it's just an intense year, even if they're not aiming super, super high. So I think, like, they need that balance.
How much can they take on and still be happy? We talk about mental health a lot too, and that's very important to me. I mean, you got to protect your teens' mental health. They can't do it all. We're in this culture of like perfectionism, and everyone's got to keep going harder and harder and reaching higher and higher.
Mhm.
Remember what it was like when we were teens? It wasn't that intense. It wasn't like that at all. I mean, and I just feel that teens having downtime, teens having time with their friends, teens just having time to just sit around and think on their
Yeah,
own, is
absolutely.
very essential and to their mental health too. So make sure if you're pushing this, there's a reason, and the reason is linked to their goals and what
Yeah,
they're looking for.
no, I
Also,
agree.
I'm working with all our seniors right now on their activity lists, and I was doing some research into like the activity list and what colleges are looking for and how important it is. And the activity list is actually one of the key elements to college applications. Once they've reached the threshold of like the school is like their stats are good enough to get in, the next thing they look at is activity lists. It's a way to really get to know a student. What are they
Mhm.
focused on? What's important to them? What will they bring to our school? Is this something we're looking for? So if studying for the SAT or the ACT is taking up so much time that it's taking away from a key activity that really is important to your teen and shows off who they are, I
Mhm.
would hesitate unless it
Yeah,
serves
I
them.
would
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But we do think students should, if they haven't at the start of junior year taken a practice test,
Right.
they should. And they should take, the practice test on Khan Academy, or the ACT does have free practice tests, but you have to kind of navigate it. It's on their site. But they try to funnel you into their test prep partnership. So you
And there's
just
a reason we know that. So
have
they
people.
pulled one over on us. So
Yes.
yes.
You just have to be sure you're getting the free full test. The ACT, I mean, just practically speaking for right now, at this moment, the ACT is not changing, but the SAT will change
Yeah.
over in January to the digital, which for some students is maybe going to be a little easier. For some students, it's going to be a little harder. I think for really top scorers, what I'm seeing is that it's a little bit more difficult to get like a perfect score because it adjusts
Mm-hmm.
as your student answers the questions to get harder. Whereas for students who are a little bit more of a struggling test taker and aiming for more of a middling score in the first place, maybe it's a little bit easier to get those scores. We think passages are shorter for the reading. There's a little bit less back and forth. So students who struggle, with those things may be a little easier. So it's kind of a weird moment to choose your test, but
You should take both of them and see
yeah.
which one you're
Well, no, you
more
should take
comfortable
both
on.
practice. I don't think you
Yeah.
should take, I
No,
mean,
that's
it's
what I mean.
up to
Both
you.
practices.
Yeah,
No,
take both.
both practices and then focus on one.
Yes. Yeah. And then pick one to focus on. And no one
Yeah.
needs both. You don't need both scores. Yeah. I think that's something. A lot of families are thinking about national merit and PSAT this year too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think students should take the PSAT? You got the
You
giggles.
know where I fall on that.
I know.
I think you should cover this one. I'm not big on the PSAT at all.
Oh
I'm
no.
just gonna put.
Unless your student is in range for national merit, there's no reason to do it in the first place. None.
Yeah.
I mean, some families are like, well, but it's free for us because blah, 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 school, blah, blah,
And
blah.
it's a good opportunity to practice taking the SAT.
I'm like, I mean, I just don't see
I
that.
just think it's an old idea that is still very fresh in the minds of parents.
I mean, for students who are in range for national merit, it can be good to do that. But even that, I mean, you have to be a top scorer. So you have to be. I mean, your kid has to be hitting really high marks on practice test.
And that's going to be different from state to state.
Yes, it's if you live in a less populated state and your student is a good test taker, they might have a really good shot.
Yeah.
If you live in California or like, Virginia or Massachusetts or, some of these states that have, a lot of intellectual parents and a lot of competition and, I mean, it just the index scores to qualify are really high. I will say they do have special programs of qualification for African American and Latino students. and also rural students. And so those test scores are a little lower. You still have to be pretty good at tests, but not on the level to get national merit. And those recognition programs can be useful for some students. Again, though, it depends on the student's goals as to whether there's much money tied to it. A lot of the time, the amount of money tied to that is, for most families, pretty low. Maybe maybe a couple $1,000s at most.
Yeah, it's not a ton. It really isn't. I mean, if you have a teen who can go take the PSAT and score super high, and it's not stressful and it's easy done, bam, it's fine.
Oh yeah,
it's just a few hours. I mean, it's not going to kill anyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, we touched on activities, but I think we should talk about it more. I don't want to talk about testing anymore.
We're done with testing.
I can't believe we talked this long about testing in the first place.
It's not a favorite topic of mine, but it's necessary. Did you see the email I just got from a college here in Virginia? I just want to bring this up because I wrote them back. They wrote me back.
Oh, I know. Because they told the student the wrong information. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to put that out there. I had to reach out to a college here in Virginia that is not on a lot of people's list. It's more of a smaller, but they were test optional for homeschoolers during COVID. They just changed their policy online, but then we had a family reach out and they're like, no, what's online is not true. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I reached out and they're like, no, they're like, you definitely need test scores as a homeschooler, no matter what. And there's no way to get around that. And I don't think that's happening at a ton of schools, but it is happening at a few now that we're getting a little further away from COVID. So have your student or you reach out and just make sure that the school they really want is test optional if you're going that way.
It also, make sure, I've talked to several schools, they do waive it for, they'll say.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
And then I had someone tell me very specifically, straight up. I was like, and are you test optional for homeschoolers? And she said, no. And then she goes, but just have them ask.
Or some of them have alternative, like I know Earlham in Indiana, which is a college that changed lives, they're not test optional really for homeschoolers, or they weren't a few years ago. I haven't looked lately, but if you had dual enrollment or a few AP scores, it was fine. Yeah. So it just depends. And I know like Knox wasn't test optional, but my son applied there and they were like, he reached out to his admission counselor who was so nice and was just going back and forth. He's like, send me your stuff, apply and I'll see what I can do. And, he got in, they didn't care. So it just depends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Now activities.